Chapter 1. 1 year ago. Cassius Clay Robinson pulled the hoodie over his head and shoved his hands in his sweatshirt's pockets. He was named after the great boxer, Muhammad Ali, formerly known as Cassius Clay. Unlike his namesake, Cassius Clay Robinson, or CC, as his friends liked to call him, was neither tall, lithe, nor did he have a gift for banter. CC stood at 5'7", had a stocky build, and he lumbered as he walked. He was also shy and introverted. He was the polar opposite of the famous athlete who had coined the phrase, "float like a butterfly, sting like a bee." CC would never float like a butterfly. His physique would not let him, but he could very well sting like a bee. The latter, however, was something he preferred not to do. CC never knew his father. The man was a petty criminal who was shot while trying to rob a convenience store. His mother was an addict who died of a drug overdose. He, along with his younger brother Marcus, were left in the care of their grandmother. His grandmother was an honest, hard-working woman. She spent her working life cleaning people's houses. She wanted her children to get a higher education, but that did not happen. Her son died in a car accident, and her daughter, Cece's mother, who was bright and intelligent, met the wrong man. According to his grandmother, Cece's father destroyed her little girl. He steered her down a road of crime and addiction. His grandmother was relieved when Cece's father was killed. She believed his evil ways would no longer infect her 2 grandchildren. Cece shivered whenever he thought of his grandmother. She was proud she earned everything in her life. She never cared for handouts, and she did not approve of stealing. Stealing was exactly what Cece had set out to do this late at night. The streets were dark. There was an occasional car on the road, but overall it was quiet. He pulled the hoodie further over his head. He felt ashamed. He was planning to do what his father had done, become a petty criminal. Worse, he was going to rob a convenience store, the exact crime that got his father killed. But Cece would not end up like his old man. He would not go into a situation without a plan. He had already scoped out the convenience store. The owner did not own a gun. At least, that's what Cece hoped. Also, during the night, the convenience store was run by the owner's son, who was probably just a few years older than Cece. Cece should have been a freshman in college, but he could not get a scholarship, and with no money to pay for tuition, he was forced to work at a packaging company. That job lasted only a short time before the company went under. A lot of employees, including Cece, were laid off without receiving their last 2 months' pay. They could hire a lawyer to recoup their lost wages, but who had the money for lawyers anyway? After a brief retirement, his grandmother had gone back to cleaning people's houses. She needed the money to help take care of Cece and his brother, but the work was tough. His brother, who was still in high school, was still wearing sneakers that were a size too small. Marcus had shot up the moment he hit puberty, and all his clothes needed to be replaced. His grandmother did her best to sew him some new clothes, but shoes were another matter. Cece would use the money from the convenience store to buy his brother a nice pair of shoes. Marcus had been through a lot. First, losing both parents at such a young age, and now he was without the basic things a boy his age should have. Marcus had stopped asking Cece for anything because he knew his brother could not provide it. But not anymore, Cece thought. I want to give my brother a better life. Chapter 2. Cece did not have a real gun. Instead, he had stashed a wooden toy gun in his sweatshirt pocket. He hoped he would not have to draw the toy gun during the robbery. Instead, he would point his aerostat's weapon through his pocket, figuring it should be enough to scare the clerk. If things became dangerous, Cece would bolt out of the store as fast as he could run. He moved down the street and then cut through a department store's empty parking lot. The convenience store was behind the department store. Once Cece had done the deed, he would use the parking lot to make his escape. As he moved through the lot, Cece thought, I wish I had brought a baseball cap. A ball cap would easily shield his face from the security cameras. But he did have a bandana in one of his pants pockets. He would keep the hoodie over his head and pull the bandana over his face. The last thing he wanted was for his face to be plastered on the news, or worse, cops showing up at his grandmother's house to arrest him. That would be the end of the woman. Her grandkids were her last hope. She prayed they would make something of themselves, and she would do everything in her power to make that happen. Cece was about to crush that hope. He moved through the empty parking lot and went around the massive building. As he turned the corner, he suddenly stopped in his tracks. A lone vehicle sat outside the store. The engine was off, and so were the headlights, but Cece could make out a silhouette behind the wheel. What the hell? He thought. Maybe the driver was waiting for someone, or maybe he was an undercover cop. Cece broke into a cold sweat. The driver's got to be an undercover cop. He debated whether he should double back, but that would look suspicious. He was certain the cop had seen him. Cece took a deep breath and kept moving. I've done nothing wrong yet. A cop can't just stop me and ask what I'm doing out so late. Cece felt a toy gun in his pocket. Shit, how do I explain this? He thought angrily as he drew closer to the vehicle. I only planned. That's it, he thought. Nobody ever got arrested for planning a crime but not carrying it out, right? There's no law against just thinking of committing a crime. He lowered his head and kept walking. As he passed the vehicle, he realized it was a Mercedes-Benz. When did undercover cops start driving luxury vehicles? He thought. He shot a glance at the driver. He noticed the driver's head was tilted to the side. Even in the low light, he could tell the driver's eyes were closed. A thought occurred to Cece. Why risk robbing a convenience store when I could rob this guy? A man who owns a Mercedes could have enough cash in his wallet, even if he doesn't. He must have a Rolex, a gold wedding ring, or something else of value on him. When Cece was past the Mercedes, he quickly pulled the bandana over his face and spun on his heel. He approached the vehicle from behind. He rushed up to the driver's side window and tapped the glass. Roll down the window, he said in a low but authoritative voice. The driver did not stir. Hey, buddy, Cece said, raising his voice. Open the window unless you want a bullet in your head. He could not believe he was threatening to hurt someone, even if he was only bluffing. His grandmother would be appalled if she saw him now. When the driver did not respond, Cece tried the door. He pulled the door ajar and realized the man was actually no older than him. He had smooth skin, dark hair, and he was wearing a white shirt. But the shirt was no longer white. It was covered in a dark liquid, a liquid that glistened in the moonlight. Blood, Cece realized with a shock. Shit, lots of blood. For a moment, Cece stood stock still. Then he lowered the bandana and said, Buddy, you okay? The man did not respond. Cece knew he had to get out of there. If anyone saw him, they would think he had something to do with it. Cece got ready to leave. The man's eyes snapped open. Cece jumped back, startled. The man let out a wet gurgle. He's alive, Cece thought. Cece knew he could not leave the man to die. He would never forgive himself if he did. He pulled out his cell phone and dialed 911.